Tite Kubo found inspiration in Zack Snyder's 300 and Guy Ritchie's Snatch for his manga career. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. For someone like Tite Kubo, inspiration has always been omnipresent. Bleach takes the best and worst of the world, combining them into one epic masterpiece. From rock music to multiple films and television shows, the impact can be both sublime and active at the same time. One can absorb ideas without even realizing. That is the beauty of art. Kubo has always been open to the new and popular, indulging himself not just in the most hyped songs but also in movies. While there are many manga and anime that inspire mangakas throughout the world, for Kubo, the case was different. He found himself captivated by not just Zack Snyder's work but also Guy Ritchie's. Both of them became huge influences for Kubo later in life. During an interview, via Tumblr, Tite Kubo talked about all the different places he found inspiration in. From rock music to the thrill of different mangas such as Yu Yu Hakusho and Saint Seiya, the mangaka has always been open to new and fresh ideas. Amongst them all, Hollywood also had its contribution in impacting Kubo's work. In fact, it was Brad Pitt and Gerard Butler's films that played such a huge role in his works. Both those films have been loved and criticized by fans, but for Kubo, they stand as great inspirations. Despite their grand success, with Snatch making $83.5 million via Box Office Mojo and 300 making a whopping $456 million via Box Office Mojo, both of the films had their own issues lined up. Snatch and 300 had a huge influence on me at the time they were screened. When asked about there being any movies that helped him through inspiration, his answer consisted of Zack Snyder's 300 and Guy Ritchie's Snatch. He stated that the films had a huge impact on him when they were released, influencing even his career as a mangaka. Based on the Battle of Thermopylae, 300 may be one of Zack Snyder's most successful films, but it has its fair share of issues. Filled with a streak of historical inaccuracies, it is more so a fictional piece of work than a historical retelling. Problem is you have Manhattan in a lot of shots, and he's just CG, you know? It's really amazing for me. The one super cool thing, I was telling Billy about it because he hadn't even seen it, he hasn't seen. I mean that shot of Manhattan walking through Vietnam, whatever, he's 30 feet tall, that's like a superhero thing. The thing to see, and the revelation to me, is him just talking and doing nothing. And just emoting in the subtlest way, which is something I haven't really seen from a CG character, that really, all he's doing is acting. He's not blowing stuff up or jumping off the walls or doing CG stuff. He's just being sad. Dr. Manhattan is one of those characters that benefit from a good character actor. We have seen the character with complete CGI, and also with practical effects, with the consensus being that the latter is an infinitely better way of bringing the character to life. However, this poses the additional challenge of adapting the subtle facial cues and such from the actor that could make or break a performance. One of the most seminal pieces of superhero fiction, penned by comics legend Alan Moore, Watchmen was one of the first radical deconstructions of the superhero genre, which ushered in a whole new era of what would come to become one of the go-to tropes for a lot of independence writers. It can be attested to that comics like Invincible, The Boys, and Irredeemable all owe a little something to Moore's masterpiece, without which they probably would not have been here today. Dr. Manhattan remains one of the most interesting characters to come out of the DC canon, a hero with godlike abilities that blurs the line between Captain Atom and Superman. Manhattan functions as a great question in the superhero world, speaking to the alienation that comes with the acquisition of immense power. Zack Snyder chose to do one superhero movie because it was based on the ultimate deconstructionist comic book. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. Snyder took up the project as he viewed it as a deconstructionist comic book in the superhero genre. The Man of Steel director wanted to make a film that showed superheroes with vulnerabilities like sexual anxiety, agoraphobia, and other wild human emotions. Zack Snyder took on a major challenge when Warner Brothers approached him to make Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' classic comic Watchmen into a film. Several directors were considered for the film, which had been in development hell since 1987. Snyder's stylish take on Frank Miller's comic 300 impressed the studio. Not every moviegoer is a fan of Zack Snyder's films. The director has managed to cultivate a separate fan base for his films, with his unique approach and style of filmmaking. Most movie buffs will describe Snyder's films as polarizing, and this was exactly the case with his superhero film, Watchmen. Warner Brothers came to Snyder to make the film, which veteran director Terry Gilliam deemed unfilmable, via Empire. During an interview with Evan Schwartz for Letterboxd, Zack Snyder revealed that he felt Watchmen was a deconstructive film. He shared that Alan Moore's comic was the ultimate deconstructionist comic book. Snyder went on to share that it was the human world vulnerabilities like sexual anxiety among superheroes that attracted him to Moore's comic. In Watchmen, the superheroes were agoraphobic, incestuous, insane, and addicted to violence. Snyder shared with Letterboxd, "Watchmen to me is like the ultimate deconstructionist comic book. Superheroes have sexual anxiety. They're all agoraphobic and incestuous and insane and addicted to violence." Snyder's film opened the possibility of adult-rated content in the superhero genre in films, which had been previously catered to a younger generation. Snyder never read the comic book form, which was released in 1986, but instead discovered the story in its graphic novel a few years later. During an older interview with EW, Zack Snyder shared the difference between Watchmen and a conventional superhero comic book. He shared that while the audience gets transported to a different world in other comics, Watchmen superimposes its heroes on the real world, which changes the way the reader perceives the world. Snyder shared with EW, "The difference between Watchmen and a normal comic book is this. With Batman's Gotham City, you are transported to another world where that superhero makes sense. Watchmen comes at it in a different way. It almost superimposes its heroes on your world, which then changes how you view your world through its prism." He also called the movie a challenge to several of the reader's beliefs. Snyder shared that the film could challenge one's existing icons, morality, the way they perceive pop culture, and even the way they perceive mythology and God. Snyder shared, "The movie is a challenge, sort of like the book is a challenge, to your icons, your morality, how you perceive pop culture, how you perceive mythology, and for that matter, how you perceive God." It was absolutely genius that Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons did all of that in the context of a superhero story. The film underperformed at the box office and could earn only $187 million against a massive budget in the range of $130 to $150 million, via the numbers. A director's cut was released for the movie with 24 minutes of additional footage and performed better than the theatrical release. Zack Snyder's tenure at the helm of affairs in the DCU was largely met with polarized views, but one idea was too far-fetched for loyal DC fans. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. Zack Snyder served as the architect of the DCU, starting his grand tale almost a decade before James Gunn and Peter Safran were eventually brought in to helm a reboot of the franchise. While Snyder never got to realize his full vision for the shared universe, he has shared several interesting tidbits and plot points from planned installments over the years. While Snyder's take on Batman was already controversial, the director had plans for an even more controversial and borderline creepy plot point for the character. In his vision for the DCU, Snyder wanted to give Batman an uncanny romance with a significant other of one of his closest allies. Here is what Snyder had planned for Ben Affleck's Batman and why the idea was too crazy. Zack Snyder introduced Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne/Batman in 2016's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The film received mostly polarizing reviews from critics and fans, particularly for its deviation from the source material. However, according to reports, Snyder had allegedly planned another deviation that DC fans might not have been able to handle. Snyder's original plan for the Justice League included a romantic subplot featuring Affleck's Batman and Amy Adams' Lois Lane. Following Superman's death at the end of Batman v Superman, Snyder planned to bring Bruce and Lois together romantically.